the 7th because of the wonderful Bhakti Bhagavad going on by Bhakti Caitanya Swami Maharaj. So please take note of this time. Thank you again so much for joining us. We'll have a little bit of kirtan to start off with. Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishna Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaura Hari Bol. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Shri Sai Gopinath Hari Hari Bol. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashulakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadam Mahyam Dati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pasharine Nirvishesha Shunyavani Pastrati Deshatarine. So, thank you all once again for the opportunity to try and serve. We're going to present an overview of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. This is a wonderful book written by Srila Prabhupada that's based on the Chaitanya Charitamrita. That's one of the authorized biographies of Lord Chaitanya by Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. This way we will have a better idea of pastimes and teachings of the Lord so that we can love Him and serve Him better. So to begin with, we will chant the invocation. That is verse 18 of the first chapter of the Adi Lila, or the first part of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. The translation: Glory to Sri Chaitanya and Nityananda, glory to Advaita Chandra, and all glories to all the devotees of Sri Gaura, Lord Chaitanya. So, in the last few weeks, 3 weeks, we've been discussing the introduction to the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Today, we'll discuss the preface. So, the preface is important as well. With the introduction, we're getting information about a book so that we can understand the reason that the book is being presented better with that information. And this is what Srila Prabhupada has given us in the introduction. He gives us the first 17 verses of the first chapter of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, where we get to hear the glories of Radha and Krishna, Lord Chaitanya's associate, and also the three main deities of Vrindavan and the reasons for Lord Chaitanya's appearance in this world. That's the introduction. But in the preface, we find in the material world commonly, this is where the author speaks from his or her perspective, maybe a little bit about themselves, why they wrote the book, and what their qualifications are for writing the book. So Srila Prabhupada, of course, being humble, doesn't speak about himself in his preface, but he speaks about the importance of this book, the importance of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So this is why I thought it was important that we would discuss this preface as well. So it's also long. We'll discuss the first part of this week, and we have the second part next week. So Srila Prabhupada begins. There is no difference between the teachings of Lord Chaitanya presented here and the teachings of Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. The teachings of Lord Chaitanya are practical demonstrations of Lord Krishna's teachings. Lord Krishna's ultimate instruction in Bhagavad Gita is that everyone should surrender unto him, Lord Krishna. Krishna promises to take immediate charge of such a surrendered soul. The Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is already in charge of the maintenance of this creation by virtue of his plenary expansion, Kshiradakshaya Vishnu. But this maintenance is not direct. However, when the Lord says that he takes charge of his pure devotee, he actually takes direct charge. So we'll discuss some points as we go along. We'll read Srila Prabhupada's wonderful words from this preface, and then we'll discuss a little on. So many people may think that Lord Chaitanya and Lord Krishna are two different people, and that Lord Chaitanya was presenting teachings that were different from what Lord Krishna had taught. But Srila Prabhupada is saying that not only are they the same person, but their teachings are in continuum. So what this means is that in Bhagavad Gita at the end, when Krishna is saying that we must surrender to him, giving up everything else, um, we are left to the point of wondering, what does this surrender actually mean? And this is where Lord Chaitanya comes to show us practically, by being a devotee, how to act in the most surrendered way. And he has very wonderful associates, devotees, disciples who appear with him. And these personalities um, are also helping us because they come from such a varied background, yet they're all able to render devotional service, render. They were from parts of India, different religions, different social backgrounds, castes, male, female, young and old. Um, and yet they were all able to apply these principles of Krishna consciousness, surrender. This is important for our understanding and our application. So Srila Prabhupada also makes a very nice point here in that Krishna is taking personal care of us when we surrender to him. Lord Vishnu within the heart is present with every living entity, and he is maintaining every living entity, but indirectly. So we discussed this previously, but we'll recap because it is a bit technical. So we said that Mahavishnu is creating all the universes by breathing them out. So he then expands himself as Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, and he enters into each universe that he had just created by his breathing. Within each universe, he lies down on the Garbhodaka ocean as Garbhodakashaya Vishnu. And from his navel is sprouting Brahma, the creator. But Brahma is the secondary creator. He is creating under the Lord's guidance, and the bodies of the living entities that he is creating, their souls are placed into material nature by the glance of Mahavishnu. So into each of these bodies is the soul of that entity, but also the super soul. And the super soul is a further expansion of Garbhodakashaya Vishnu. And this expansion is called Kshiradakashaya Vishnu. So Kshiradakashaya Vishnu is a super soul, and he is maintaining every living entity as that living entity's karma dictates. So he's providing those basic necessities, and when that living entity has a desire, Garbhodakashaya Vishnu is sanctioning that desire, and thus it is said that not a blade of grass moves without the Lord's sanction. But still, the living entity's desire initiates that series of events. Therefore, the living entity um, takes responsibility for that desire by suffering karma that is either good or bad. So this is for us to understand that although the Lord is maintaining us by providing things, these things are, of course, according to our desire. So we're sort of left to our own devices to suffer good or bad reactions from those desires, and therefore we move about from species to species, lifetime after lifetime, suffering these karmas. But when we take shelter of Krishna and we directly surrender to Him, then He's taking charge of us. He's sorting out those good and bad karmas in order to facilitate our devotional service. He's actually able to minimize those karmas, which He does out of love for all the devotees. And He personally guides us within and without as the spiritual master, so that we are given the very best opportunity to render devotional service and to be released from the clutches of this material nature. So that's a very special opportunity that's awarded to those who are surrendered unto Him. But the important words to note is fully surrendered. We can't expect Krishna to take full or complete charge of us if we're not full or completely surrendered, fully or completely surrendered to Him. And Krishna himself clarifies this in the Bhagavad Gita when he says, chapter 4, text 11, Yeyatamam prapadhyante tam sudeva bhajamiham amavardman vardate manushyah partha sarvashaham. As all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Gita. So for Krishna to grant his complete care, we have to be completely surrendered to him. And this complete surrender is very difficult for us. And it is because it requires a conscious effort on our part. Srila Prabhupada said that we should be conscious before we're Krishna conscious. So what does that mean? Because we may think we're conscious, but we're actually not. And the reason why is because mostly in our day-to-day lives, we're acting in a mainly unconscious fashion because we're acting from an anxious or a fearful state. Um, this defensive way of thinking comes actually from the subconscious, where our fears and anxieties are lurking. Um, this can also spill over into irritation and anger. And we also go into dysthymic states. We're not really happy. We're just sort of um, going about our day-to-day lives in a routine way. Um, and then that can take us into the state of depression tipped over. So we can see that this actual, stark reality um, means that these behaviors are not coming from us consciously. They're coming from the subconscious. So they're not really thinking. We're just reacting, um, mainly in a protective mode, planning against danger or reacting to danger. And this is the result of millions of lifetimes of conditioning and also the ancestral patterns that we inherit from our families, as well as reactions to the bad experiences that we've had in this life. So it basically means that all this reflex behavior that we've developed within ourselves and also inherited from time immemorial is causing us to basically act without thinking, and thus mostly in an unchristian conscious way. And we don't even realize it at all. So we have to actually start consciously noting our thoughts and our behaviors in order to streamline to that natural state of behaving as the servant of Krishna, or rather the servant of Krishna. So it seems pretty daunting to actually like start, where to start with such a thing. But we are so fortunate that we have the shelter of Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga, and Sri Radha to pray to them sincerely for direction and guidance. Um, our good fortune in coming in this line of Chaitanya is that um, even though it is indeed that we are getting the teachings of Lord Krishna, we're getting these teachings through Sri Radha, who is the sweetest, loving, and most compassionate of personalities, because it is her personality in Lord Chaitanya. It is her personality through him that is giving us these teachings. And so, in this line of succession after Lord Chaitanya, we're getting her love and her mercy and her protection to help us with these difficult matters, which become so much more simple under her mercy. So, Sri Prabhupada continues: a pure devotee is a soul who is forever surrendered to the Lord, just as a child is surrendered to his parents or an animal to its master. In the surrendering process, one should 1. Accept things favorable for discharging devotional service. 2. Reject things unfavorable. 3. Believe firmly in the Lord's protection. 4. Feel exclusively dependent on the mercy of the Lord. 5. Have no interest separate from the interest of the Lord. And 6. Always feel oneself meek and humble. So this is what we are expected to do when we surrender to Krishna completely. Sri Prabhupada has given nice examples. A small child and an animal, they're dependent fully on the parent and the master, respectively. There's no possibility of that child or animal doing anything for themselves without direction or without protection and guidance. So this is how we have to surrender to Krishna. We have to give up this concept of autonomy that we have, because this autonomy usually just gets us in trouble. And we need to think of Krishna first before we think, do, and say anything, and basically live this life fully under his protection and shelter. Um, this is what surrenders. Sri Prabhupada has given us the behavior of a surrendered soul specifically. So we'll take it point by point. Number 1 is to accept things favorable for discharging devotional service. So this refers to all the activities that one who wants to serve Krishna would perform. Activities that are good for one's spiritual life. So this includes rising early at Mangal Arti, chanting 16 rounds a day, reading scripture, taking association of devotees. All these activities are good for our Krishna consciousness. But what we have to be careful about is that we perform activities that are good for devotional service and that are not just good for us when we are performing devotional service. So what's the difference? It's very subtle, but we could take an example. If one really likes very spicy prasadam, but we know that spices, heavy spices, are actually in the mode of passion, as Krishna gives an explanation in Bhagavad Gita. So to prepare bhoga in this way would actually be for ourselves. Although we're offering it to Krishna, which is an act of devotional service, but this is more favorable for ourselves, for our taste, than it is for that act of devotional service. So we have to consider our activities in this way so that we can avoid falling into these subtle traps. Um, so in the same way, we're advised to think of Krishna. But if we're thinking of Krishna unfavorably, we're complaining about what he's allowed to happen in our lives, we're complaining about what's going on in our spiritual centers or what's going on with the devotees. That's not favorably thinking of Krishna or uh, devotees or devotional service. So the next point is to reject things that are unfavorable. So this is a little more straightforward in that we follow the four regulative principles, and we also understand that we have to avoid things that will distract us from thinking about Krishna. So these things are very obvious. Sri Prabhupada always cautioned us about not reading newspapers and not watching TV, avoiding bars, clubs, and restaurants, and things like that. And of course, in this modern day, we have the internet, social media, and other things that we have to be very circumspect about so that we don't get too misled by being involved in things that are distracting us from thinking about Krishna. But we also have to be careful that we analyze our activities in terms of whether the activities are bad or whether the consciousness that we're performing is bad. So, for example, if we're driving and driving is producing a stressful reaction within us, but that driving is taking us to work to perform work for Krishna or taking us to the temple to perform our devotional service, then there's nothing actually wrong with driving, but it's the stress within us. While we're getting angry about the traffic on the road, or while we're getting stressed about driving, we know that we're under the protection of Krishna. So in that way, it's not the activity itself that needs to be stopped, but it's the consciousness that we are performing the activity with that needs to be adjusted. So the third point is to believe firmly in the Lord's protection. So Srila Prabhupada says in the Nectar of Instruction, in the purport to verse 3, Avashya Rakshive Krishna. Krishna will surely protect me and give me help for the successful execution of devotional service. This is called confidence. So imagine if you promise to help somebody with a task and you have every intention of helping them and you're fully capable of helping them, but they keep doubting your involvement and they keep doubting your ability. So this would be very hurtful. And this is what we do when we doubt Krishna's protection. Um, we're hurting him. We're praying to him for protection, but right in our hearts, where he can hear us, we're feeling that he's not going to protect us. And we have to address the underlying reason that we don't feel that he's going to protect us. This is because we don't know what is good for us. We don't know what situations we actually need to be protected in or taken care of in. Sometimes when it appears that Krishna is subjecting us to some difficulties or dangers, it's for our own good, but we don't see it that way. So this is why we doubt Krishna's protection. So we have to address that doubt within ourselves. That when we surrender fully to Krishna, it means that we accept His protection in all ways, even if it appears that He's not protecting us. He is always protecting us. It's just that there are lessons that we need to learn in the different ways that He subjects us to situations. So being confident of His protection is part of surrender. Um, Number 4 is to feel exclusively dependent on the mercy of the Lord. So this means that if we at all think that we, with our perhaps academic, financial, or our skills base, are able to protect ourselves, if we are dependent on family, friends, and um, other persons, and we don't realize that it's actually Krishna who is taking care of us through these people or assisting us through these people, then that is not surrender. Surrender means that we have to always be aware of, always be conscious of the fact that it's Krishna's mercy that is taking care of us, that we are fully dependent on Him in every way, that there's nothing and no one else that can save us or can help us or can maintain us in our daily lives. So, besides us being aware of this mercy, we must always be grateful for it and always thank Krishna for it. So number 5 is to have no interest separate from the interest of the Lord. So this means that whatever we do, whatever we think, every activity, whatever we say, everything has to have Krishna at the center, and it's always be for His good before it's for our good. This requires a lot of practice, but again, we can start with in a conscious way. When we get up in the morning, make it uh, our conscious duty to think of Him first, to thank Him for waking up, to pray for His mercy through the day, and through every activity that we start off, switching on the stove, switching on the computer, driving to work, we think about Him and we add thoughts of Him in favorable, good ways, obviously, to every activity that we're doing. And we try to think of Him before we speak. This is a bit more difficult because, again, we speak in a very defensive way, mostly from our subconscious. But if we practice these, if we start somewhere, He will help us within the heart, seeing our effort to try and do this. He always helps us. And then number 6 is always feel oneself meek and humble. So this goes without saying that it's something that we must cultivate actively. Humility is so important in Krishna consciousness, as we know from Lord Chaitanya's teachings in Sri Shikshashika. If we're actively searching on praise, it's certainly not humility. But if someone praises us without us wanting that praise, but we're enjoying it, then that's also not humility. In the same way, as we mentioned earlier, if our opulences, our education, our appearances, our family, if all of those things are making us feel proud, we're less likely to be humble before the Lord and surrendered to Him. It also affects our moods and our mentalities, because we generally get angry when things don't go our way because we think we deserve something. This comes from ego, which is the exact opposite to humility. We get disappointed, we suffer. All of these negative reactions comes from when we are expecting something to go our way because we think we deserve something or we should have something, which is a thought that comes from our ego, and we don't realize that Krishna is obviously putting us through a test to test that ego, to test our meekness and our humility and accepting the situation fully as His mercy. So we have to be very careful when we are facing these adverse situations, because, as we said earlier, Krishna is giving sanction for everything. So it means if we have a distressful situation, whether we think it's from the government, from our bosses, Krishna is sanctioning it. It means that He has a special meaning, especially for His devotees, behind what He sanctions. So we have to make an effort to not just get upset, to not rail against those we think are offending us. We have to sometimes maybe forcing ourselves to sit down, to think about the situation carefully, to pray to Krishna for what He's trying to understand, what He's trying to teach us, and to try and master these lessons. Because if we don't, they're going to keep repeating until we learn them, and then until, of course, we don't need them anymore. So it's up to us to make that conscious effort to learn from every apparently negative situation that Krishna sanctions. This is how we can more easily develop meekness and humility. This is so important to surrender. So Srila Prabhupada continues. The Lord demands that one surrender unto Him by following these 6 guidelines, but the unintelligent so-called scholars of the world misunderstand these demands and urge the general mass of people to reject them. At the conclusion of the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna directly says, engage your mind always in thinking of me, offer obeisances and worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. This is Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, text 34. However, the scholarly demons misguide the masses of people by directing them to the impersonal, unmanifest, eternal, unborn truth, rather than the personality of Godhead. So the verse that Srila Prabhupada is referencing here is Manmanapa Madhakto Madhyaji Mamaskuru Mami Vaishas Dvaivam Atmanavaparayana. So here Krishna is using the words man in Sanskrit, directly translated as me. And when he's saying mud or mat, he's saying my. So these words, me and my, very clearly in all cultures and different languages, are going to refer to the person speaking them, me or my. But somehow, people who are determined not to surrender to Krishna interpret these words to mean some unborn soul within Krishna. Now, even then, logic would dictate that we ask, the soul is the real us, it's the real person within. So, even if Krishna is speaking about me or my as the real him within, it can't be separate from the person without. But those who are determined again not to surrender to Krishna will say that it is an unborn and formless uh, supreme God, more powerful than Krishna. And by them believing in this formless God, this light, they justify not surrendering to Krishna. Because then they say that since we are all individual souls composed of the same substance of Krishna, which we do know, we're all one in quality with Krishna. But they believe that that means that they can then, by some process of self-realization, become God themselves and then become one with this light. And this spares them surrendering to Krishna. And all of this comes from the fact that their very powerful false ego developed over millions of lifetimes just will not let them surrender to Krishna. They cannot bow down or accept his authority. And they're so full of envy for him. Envy is a quality that made us fall from the spiritual world. They're so full of envy for Krishna, so full of their false ego that they will never surrender to the point where they actually have to develop this whole um, fairly um, un, uh, sensible, nonsensical philosophy in order to justify their beliefs. So we've been discussing extensively about the powers of Krishna, how even his expansions, the great and wonderful Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, are performing such extraordinary activities in creating and maintaining and then destroying the creation. We know about Krishna's amazing activities when he incarnates. We've heard about the spiritual world, which is so extraordinary. Yet, despite knowing about all of this extensive glories, we who are so finite in our abilities, we still think that we can become God. This is the most amazing thing. So this is born out of this incredible false ego, and the tragic thing about it is that this is what keeps people perpetually cycling in birth and death, because until they're able to overcome that false ego and surrender to Krishna, they will never get out of this material world. Sri Prabhupada continues. The impersonalist Mayavadi philosophers do not accept that the ultimate aspect of the Absolute Truth is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one desires to understand the sun as it is, one must face the sunshine, then the sun globe, and after entering into that globe, come face to face with the predominating deity of the sun. Due to a poor, oh, sorry, Due to a poor fund of knowledge, the Mayavadi philosophers cannot go beyond the Brahman effulgence, which may be compared to the sunshine. The Upanishads confirm that one has to penetrate the dazzling effulgence of Brahman before one can see the real face of the personality of Godhead. So the verse that Srila Prabhupada is mentioning here is verse 15 from the Sri Upanishad. Hiranmayena patena satyasya hitam mukham tattvam pushan aparinam satya dharmaya drishtaye. O my Lord, sustainer of all that lives, your real face is covered by your dazzling effulgence. Kindly remove that covering and exhibit yourself to your pure devotee. So what is clear here is that there is a light. Krishna has a feature that is his divine effulgence, but that's not the highest understanding of who Krishna is. Um, this is why Srila Prabhupada gives us this very nice analogy of the sunshine, the sun glow, and the sun god. So what Srila Prabhupada tells us is that this understanding of Brahman and Brahman itself is comparable to the sun's rays. So if somebody tries to understand the sun's rays, that's very good. But there's still higher understandings of this rays, where it comes from, its source, what is greater in its full experience of the sun itself than the rays. And this means that one who studies the sun's rays is not the most advanced student of the sun. They only understand the rays. So one who tries to understand the sun globe or the sun planet, which the rays actually originate from, gets more of an understanding. And this is comparable to Krishna in his Kshiradakshaya Vishnu form, um, the Lord within the heart, super soul. But there is a full understanding of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, and he is compared to the sun god. So the student, the one who has the understanding of Krishna himself, Bhagavan, that student is the one who has the highest understanding out of all three of those who try to understand the sun shine, the sun globe, and the sun god. So, therefore, one who tries to understand Krishna by devotional service, this person has the highest understanding because they're going directly to Krishna, the source of the sun globe and sun base, or the source of the Paramatma and the Brahman effulgence, the one supreme absolute truth. And this is what Lord Chaitanya was trying to teach us. When we think, or when people who follow an impersonalist philosophy think that they can just become one with uh, God by this Brahman effulgence, one just needs to remember the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, because Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna. He's our source. He's God. He created us. So if he tells us you can't merge into my effulgence, it means you can't merge into his effulgence. He knows the capabilities of all living entities, of all spirit souls. Sometimes it's very difficult for us to try and make sense of the person form of the Lord and his superiority as the absolute truth to those who are impersonalists. And Srila Prabhupada Chaitanya actually advised us not to. All we need to do if we ever feel confused by their theories is just remember what Lord Chaitanya said. The Supreme Lord himself is telling us that we can't become one with God and we can't follow an impersonalist philosophy to get the highest realization of who the Supreme Lord is and to get out of this material world permanently. Then we should just listen because we all came from him in the first place. So this is why Lord Chaitanya, in the most common sense and wonderful way, is taking us directly to the understanding of Krishna as the Supreme Lord and how to serve Krishna as the Supreme Lord. So Srila Prabhupada says, Lord Chaitanya therefore teaches direct worship of Lord Krishna, who appeared as the foster child of the king of Braj. He also suggests that the place known as Vrindavan is as good as Lord Krishna because there is no difference between the name, quality, form, pastimes, entourage, and paraphernalia of Lord Krishna and Lord Krishna himself. This is the absolute nature of the absolute truth. So the importance, the urgency of going straight to Krishna and trying to serve him and understand him is that we know from the Srimad Bhagavatam that in Kali Yuga our lifespans are short. We also know repeatedly that the human life is rare. So we don't have much time in order to understand Supreme Lord to be able to get to that advanced stage of surrendering to Him. So we must take to devotional service sincerely. And He's so merciful that He facilitates this by coming to the material world and displaying all His pastimes here. He brings not just a replica of Vrindavan, he brings Vrindavan itself. He brings all his associates, he brings his paraphernalia as Srila Prabhupada is describing, so that we can be aware of what the spiritual world is actually like, so that we can surrender. Krishna understands that we're always so full of these doubts that are making us very reluctant to surrender because of so many lifetimes of conditioning. So he puts the spiritual world in front of us and says, this is what you need to achieve. So you'd be practically crazy to not believe in it, but also not to try and attain it after all the miserable situations that we've encountered in this world. Nobody in their right senses wants to stay here. Srila Prabhupada always says that the spiritual world is not a place for a gentleman. Of course, for a gentle lady as well. So, Srila Prabhupada continues. Lord Chaitanya also recommended that the highest mode of worship in the highest perfectional stage is the method practiced by the damsels of Raja. These damsels, gopis or cowherd girls, simply loved Krishna without a motive for material or spiritual gain. Chaitanya also recommended Srimad Bhagavatam as the spotless narration of transcendental knowledge, and he pointed out that the highest goal in human life is to develop unalloyed love for Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here, Srila Prabhupada sums up the way that we should surrender. Lord Chaitanya is teaching us about all the loving relationships that Krishna can have with his devotees, servants of him, parents, friends, and highest of all, the lovers who are the gopis. And of all the gopis, the highest love is found in Sri Radha, and this is the mood that Lord Chaitanya has taken in order to teach us about surrender. And of course, we get the knowledge of surrender from Sri Bhagavatam, which also helps us stabilize our spiritual life so that we can attain surrender. So about the gopis and Sri Radha, Srila Rupa Goswami says in the Nectar of Instruction, verse 10, Karmabhya parito harihe priyataya vyaktim yajur jnaninas Debhyo jnana vimukta bhakti paramaha pramaika nishtasataha Debhyastaha pashupala pankaja Dreshas tabhyopi saradha Krishta tatvad iyam tadya Rasi tamna shrayakaha In the Shastra, it is said that of all types of fruitive workers, he who is advanced in knowledge of the higher values of life is favored by the Supreme Lord Hari. Out of many such people who are advanced in knowledge, jnanis, one who is practically liberated by virtue of his knowledge may take to devotional service. He is superior to the others. However, one who has actually attained prema, pure love of Krishna, is superior. The gopis are exalted above all the advanced devotees because they are always totally dependent upon Sri Krishna, the transcendental cowherd boy. Among the gopis, Srimati Radharani is the most dear to Krishna. Her Kunda lake is as profoundly dear to Lord Krishna as this most beloved of the gopis. Who then will not reside at Radha Kund and in a spiritual body surcharged with ecstatic devotional feelings of Prakrita Bhav, render loving service to the divine couple Sri Sri Radha Govinda, who perform their Ashtakalya Leela, the eternal eightfold daily pastime. Indeed, those who execute devotional service on the banks of Radha Kund are the most fortunate people in the universe. So, what is it that makes the surrender of the gopis greater than any other devotee? When the gopis went to Krishna at night, they left behind many things, of course, their family, their homes, but they also left behind their honor, their reputation, their good name. There isn't many or any devotees who actually went to that extreme. And then on top of that, when they were in the middle of their pastimes, what they had sacrificed everything for, Krishna left them. Instead of them getting upset with him, they surrendered even more to him and absorbed themselves so much in his pastimes that those pastimes were actually present with them at the time. Krishna himself actually wasn't far. He just couldn't keep himself away from that kind of love. And then we must consider what happened when he left Vrindavan and went to Dwarka, Mathura first and then Dwarka. The gopis were so surrendered to Krishna, so completely dependent on him only, that they couldn't even maintain their lives. But they actually did. That is a most extraordinary surrender because to give up their lives in such a state would be the expected reaction because that would spare them pain. But then that would cause Krishna pain. So, in order to spare him pain, but which resulted in their intolerable suffering, they stayed alive. They maintained their lives just for his sake, because to them, living was actually tolerable. So, this is a level of surrender that we actually can't comprehend. This is very, very deep, but we should just appreciate it, not try to imitate it in any way, just appreciate it. So that we can cherish the examples of these pure souls, so we can pray to them for their help and their mercy. So as Lord Chaitanya advised, by reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, which gives us that firm philosophical basis to our devotional service. And by, of course, taking the association of devotees, sincerely rendering services to Krishna, we can also come to the point of being able to develop pure love for Him and that complete surrender that is so necessary for us to attain Him. So, thank you so much for your kind attention. Please join us next week where we'll discuss the second half of the preface of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Shri Shintai Gaura Hari Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Are there any questions? Any comments, clarifications?
Hi, Krishna Maji, thank you for the wonderful class. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Maji.
So if there's no questions, we'll have a short, very sweet bhajan. Since we have been discussing the wonderful mercy of Srimati Radharani, especially in our line, this is a really nice bhajan by Srila Rupa Goswami, glorifying Srimati Radharani, called Radhe Jai Jai Mat. Radhe, Radhe, Jaya Jaya Madhava Radhe. Radhe, Jaya Jaya Madhava Radhe. Gokula Tarani Mandala Mahite, Gokula Tarani Mandala Mahite. Radhe, Jaya Jaya Madhava Radhe. Radhe, Jaya Jaya Madhava Radhe. Radhe Vardhana Veshe, Anina Vrinda Vineshe. Radhe Vardhana Veshe, Anina Vrinda Vineshe. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Radhe. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Radhe. Shubhandadi Navashashi Leke, Lalita Shaki Gunaramita Vishake. Shubhandadi Navashashi Leke, Lalita Shaki Gunaramita Vishake. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Radhe. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Radhe. Karanam Guru Mahi Karuna Varite, Sanaka Kana Kana Varnita Charite. Karanam Guru Mahi Karuna Varite, Sanaka Kana Kana Varnita Charite. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Radhe. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Radhe. Gokul Taruni Mandala Mahite, Gokul Taruni Mandala Mahite. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Radhe. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Radhe. Jaya Radha 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 Radhe. Jaya Radha 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 Radhe. Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe. Jaya Shri Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Nita Gora Hari, Nita Gora Hari, Gora Hari, Nita Gora Hari, Nita Gora Hari, Gora Hari, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Gora Hari Bo, Nita Gora Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Gora Hari Bo, Jai Jai Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada, Jai Jai Gurudev, 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 Jai Gurudev, Jai Jai Gurudev, 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 Jai Jai Gurudev. Shri Shri Radha Madhava ki jai, Shri Shri Radha Raghunath ki jai, Shri Shantai Gaur Hari ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Shantai Gaur. So read the translation. Refrain. O Radha, O beloved of Madhava, O you who are worshipped by all the young girls of Gokul, all glories unto you, all glories unto you. You who dress yourself in such a way as to increase Lord Damodar's love and attachment, O Queen of Vrindavan, which is the pleasure grove of Lord Hari. O new moon that has arisen from the ocean of King Vrishabhan, O friend of Lalita, O you who make Vishaka loyal to you due to your wonderful qualities of friendliness, kindness, and faithfulness to Krishna. O you who are filled with compassion, O you whose divine characteristics are described by the great sages, Sanaka and Sanatana. O Radha, please be merciful. So once again, thank you all so much for your attention and for your participation. Please join us next week. As we said, we continue with the second part of this preface. Shri Shaddai Gaur Hari Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Hare Krishna.